Hey guys, welcome to the draft at Pigskin Nut. I am your temporary host, turning over the reins to Tamara Butler shortly. I'm Steve Fishkin, my partner here, Austin Smith. We are again the draft at Pigskin Nut, and we are two guys that have had a long-standing history, well, a few years now, of going back and forth every single year, talking about prospects, evaluating players. For the NFL draft. And for me and Austin, this is definitely for us our favorite time of the football year. So, Austin, we're getting ready, for the draft season again. A little bit different this year with no combine and everything that's going on.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's certainly going to be a much more difficult environment for the typical evaluator and scout, simply because this the pandemic going all the way back to the beginning of the season. A lot of guys opting out, guys that still needed to further develop. A lot of guys, playing shortened schedules. Some of them not even getting a chance because some of the smaller school guys weren't going to be playing until the spring. And now all of a sudden we didn't get an East-West Shrine game, which is usually a really good chance to see some of those guys that are really trying to make themselves into day three prospects. The combine, the pro days are going to be that much more elevated because we have no combine. And I think that's going to give a little bit more power to the players. They can kind of choose what they want to do and don't want to do. And so evaluators, they're definitely going to have to trust their guts on this one. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to happen all the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, a new format in terms of the process that evaluators, are going to have to go through this year. And, ultimately, it's really going to come down to the pro days, because that's really all you're going to be getting this draft season. So we got Tamara here. Tamara, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're looking forward to this draft season.
Yeah, so I am from Madison, Wisconsin. I grew up a Packers fan, still love the Packers. You guys will see me, of course, writing about the Packers most often in the NFC North. But I'm also a mom with a little boy who hopefully will start getting into football here pretty soon. I'm really excited for the draft this year. I do agree with Austin there that I think it'll be really in the players' favor this year, with not really having some of those events that kind of put people under pressure. And so not having that pressure and kind of just going off of real raw football that they played in real time and in real games can also help players and kind of show truly who they are, not under pressure and not feeling like they have, the weight of the world on their shoulders in those 40 seconds and those 15 seconds where they're showcasing skills. So I'm super excited to kind of see where guys go just based off of talent that we've seen over the shortened season in the past seasons that they've been able to play.
Good stuff. And with the NFL Combine, people always talk about, some of these drills are overrated, but for a lot of times over the past number of years, we're starting to see guys, when they do perform well at the Combine, it does shoot up their draft stock, and a lot of these guys are hitting in the NFL, at the next level. Devin White, perfect example of that. But for me, definitely not having the Combine kind of stinks a little bit, because when you're talking about, the wide receiver tight end drills, you want to see if a guy's a natural hands catcher versus a body catcher. And I'll say for offensive linemen, there's a lot of guys that come into the NFL that are very raw. The one thing I like to see is guys who move well and have great feet and, can play with good leverage. And ultimately, you don't really get a chance to see how fluid these guys, these guys move. And, for all the things that people say are overrated about the Combine, a lot of this stuff is very telling, depending upon what drill and, what position, we're talking about. So with that, we're going to focus today on, the past few NFL drafts, because we've seen certain things happen that, hey, there are certain lessons to be learned by evaluators that, hey, based on how players have panned out the past few NFL drafts, based on, how well a guy fit into a system. There are things that I think evaluators and really front offices, can learn as a whole in terms of draft strategy and things that are going to give them a good return. So the way we've set this up is myself, I have 3 lessons, and Austin has 3 lessons that we believe NFL evaluators and front offices, they should have learned these things over the past few NFL drafts. So we'll each take 4 minutes to go over ours, and we're going to keep this a pretty open conversation. So I'll say mine, and then Austin interject, and we'll kind of just talk back and forth on them. So Tamara, hosting duties, it's all you.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hear what you guys have to say. Steve, we will start with you. So if you want to go ahead with your number 1.
Absolutely. So number 1 thing, and I don't have these in any particular order of importance, but I think when you're looking at the quarterback position, and I think there's a difference between having talent and having skill. I think when you look at Zach Wilson, I think when you look at Mac Jones, not to say Zach Wilson isn't talented, but these guys have skill in terms of playing the position. I think when you look at Tua Tagovailoa, the guy has a lot of skill playing the position, and we saw that at the college level. But I'm gonna put 3 names out there: Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. What these guys all have is they all have tremendous, what I call wiggle, as an athlete. And not only do they have tremendous throwing arms, but they have a huge arsenal of things they can do with that arm in terms of different arm angles. So so you've seen that, if you have the right coaching and the right, setup there, you can draft. I think teams have to start considering that, if the guy has this much talent, we got to take them over the guy who might be NFL ready, whose skill set is a little more refined. Austin, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Over the last, probably, I'd even go back the last decade, we've slowly started to see NFL offenses transition to a lot of the things that colleges do successfully. The college game has kind of bled into the NFL a little bit more. And so, maybe 10, 12 years ago, guys like Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, and even going into this year, Justin Fields, these guys were devalued because they weren't polished, they weren't NFL ready, and you didn't have the time to groom a guy for 1 or 2 years, without getting any kind of results out of him, and so they were devalued. But as the NFL game has kind of transitioned to, like I say, a lot of the offenses that the colleges are having success with, we started to see that college to NFL transition for quarterbacks get a little bit, and it's never going to be easy, but get a little bit more or less difficult. And that's why you're seeing Justin Herbert, a guy that a lot of people had their doubts about, and he steps in with the Chargers and he goes right to work and has a Rookie of the Year campaign. I mean, Patrick Mahomes made some of the worst decisions I've ever evaluated from a college quarterback. I mean, we're talking about a guy who would just throw balls up blindly to avoid a sack on 3rd downs, knowing that you could just live to punt it away or something. These guys are finding it easier to have success because you're right. They do have that raw talent, that huge upside, and polish is something that, of course, you'd love to have both. You'd love to have great upside and polish, but it's just not something that's always feasible.
It is
with the way
year.
Things work today.
You got it this year. Got it this year for sure.
For sure, yeah, and to talk about Patrick Mahomes, he was just playing in a Super Bowl here. So to kind of put that in perspective, those guys that weren't always as polished, didn't look as good, coming out of college to end up in a Super Bowl and be just a couple touchdowns away from winning. So we will move on to our number 2 here. Steve, we will go back to you.
Oh no, we'll go to Austin. We'll go with his first one there. We'll switch back and forth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and my first one, and this is something that it goes back to kind of what we were saying about college offenses. Wide receivers are always going to be available throughout the draft process, and I'm not just talking about on day 1. I'm talking about day 2, day 3. You can always find wide receivers that can have an impact for you early in their career. They come in all shapes and sizes. Teams out there that need, a talented guy in the slot. There are always going to be guys available. So many teams now in the college level are running 3 and 4 receiver sets and are implementing those shorter, quicker guys in the middle or more physical guys in the middle, like a Jarvis Landry or someone like that. Or, the Anquan Bolden was really kind of one of the first ones that I was real big on that played the slot in a different way, almost played it like a combination of a tight end and your really good route running slot. But there's just always going to be guys like that. There's always going to be big-bodied receivers that can be mismatch problems for smaller corners. There's always going to be guys with that, top-tier deep speed that can take the top off a defense. And there's always going to be guys out there that are more polished route runners. We're seeing it more and more. Some of these colleges are really trusting their quarterbacks to throw guys to throw to guys before they're coming out of their cuts, knowing that receiver is going to be responsible. It's just one of those things where, it's funny. For years we talked about, you can always find a running back later. Now you can always find a wide receiver later, especially if you don't need that primary number 1 overall target. If you've got, a DeAndre Hopkins or a Michael Thomas or, a Devontae Adams, someone like that on your roster, and you're looking for receivers that complement their games, guys, sure, you'd love to have a guy that complements it in the first round, but man, no sweat. There's going to be guys on day 2. There's going to be guys on day 3.
And teams can sit back and really say to themselves, what does my offense need at this time? Because you might have a number 1 wide receiver on the outside that can stretch the field, and you might need to have that guy in the slot. So I think teams can really sit back and kind of have their pick, because they know that, like you said, they come in all different shapes and sizes, and it's really about which of these guys is going to be the puzzle to help you further your offense.
Exactly.
Perfect. Well, if we're done with number 1, now we really will move on to number 2. We'll throw it back here to Steve.
Yeah. So, and I, my lesson here, as you can see on the screen, and I would probably say to couple this with, really great space eating, interior defensive lineman is, I think, and I think Devin White's got to be the perfect example of that. Levante David wasn't drafted in the last few years, but still, I think when you look at those 2 linebackers on that team, it's a telling story. And, I know Vita Vea wasn't, healthy this year, but they had an Ndamukong Suh up there, a guy that really allowed these linebackers, to roam free, because these linebackers nowadays, you're asking them to drop back into coverage because it's a passing league a lot more than before. And, we used to kind of say with the combine, okay, this guy is just a combine guy, but, we're seeing these middle linebackers, who are testing very well and move very well. Even if their instincts are not perfect, these guys can develop into very special players. And I think when you look at, a Devin White or even a Devin Bush, a Levante David, these are, and really you look at what Tampa Bay did this postseason, off the ball linebackers, especially you compare, with a good space eating, interior defensive lineman, you let these guys roam free. It is going to make a massive difference for what you can do on defense.
Absolutely. Athleticism is becoming such a big deal. The term over the years has kind of come up, three down linebackers. And, and that's because, man, you've got to have linebackers that can offer something to you on third down, usually in coverage. You always love a linebacker that can time his blitzes right and come off a guy's hip and get after the quarterback. But the truth be told, you know, these passing offenses are just getting more and more complex as time goes by, and you have to have linebackers that can hold up in space and in coverage. You have to have guys that can kind of match up on running backs or tight ends or even slot players to be able to help your secondary out in coverage. You have to have guys that can do that. And so the idea of that big, physical linebacker that is just terrific in the box, but doesn't exactly have the athleticism to go sideline to sideline. Whether it's the run game or the passing game, those guys are becoming more of a liability. With the speed of the NFL game, and it's just one of those things that athleticism is just becoming a vital trait for linebackers.
Yeah, and I mean, you're asking nowadays. You're asking safeties to do more of the things that linebackers do, and you're asking linebackers to do more of the things that safeties can. Yes, it's great. Me being a Giants fan, loved watching Blake Martinez this year. Had a great nose for the ball, tremendous instincts. But at the same time, what were we missing? We were missing more athletic linebackers that can drop into coverage, because when you have those guys, it makes a tremendous difference. And to we can watch Levante David, you can watch Devin White. These guys are tremendous in coverage and tremendous in space.
Awesome. Well, we will go ahead and go with Austin's number 2.
It's funny because Steve's number 2 kind of helps me transition into mine. And this is something that we're really talking about over the last several years, has really started popping up. And that's that, guys, these defensive hybrids that are coming out of the college game, guys that fit at multiple positions but may not have a natural position at one. You've got to have defensive coordinators that when they put their finger on that particular prospect, they say, hey, I've got a role he can play. I know how he can fit in our defensive system. If not, you might need to take that guy's name off the board. And I'll go over a list of players here for you. Minka Fitzpatrick is a guy coming out of Alabama. Was he a free safety? Was he a strong safety? Was he a corner or a slot? He could do a little bit of all of it. He did do a little bit of all of it during his time at Alabama. And he goes to Miami, and they want to play him as a strong safety. And he's like, I just don't feel like I'm getting, I'm being valued properly here. He goes over to Pittsburgh, and almost instantly he becomes, a Pro Bowler. He's, one of the better defensive backs in the league. And it's because they are making his role a little bit more versatile. They had a role in mind for him. Another guy, a little bit similar, Jibril Peppers. This is a guy that I heard, some scouts say, man, if he were only a few inches taller and about 20 pounds heavier, he'd be the best linebacker in that particular draft. And they thought that was his best natural position. Others are like, oh, he'd almost be a great nickel corner. He fit as a safety probably best, but you had to find a role for a guy like that. He goes to Cleveland. He was next to useless for them. They could not find a role for that. He goes over to the New York Giants, and suddenly they're using him in the slot. He comes on blitzes sometimes. Sometimes they match him up against certain receivers or backs or tight ends. All of a sudden, they're getting more out of him than the team that initially drafted him. I look at Isaiah Simmons, who was drafted last year. Another guy goes to Arizona, hardly has a role for him early in the season. Then all of a sudden, they found a little niche for him. They put him in. He starts thriving in that down the stretch. He played his best football for the Arizona Cardinals.
I'm another guy, I think.
Yeah,
because with a guy like Tremaine Edmonds, remember he came out a few years ago, Austin. The guy's upside was outrageous, but I didn't really know. I'm like, okay, I know he's a linebacker, but Is this going to be a guy who's asked to rush the passer at the next level? What is he going to be asked to do? Because you got the tremendous athleticism and the outrageous upside, and they said no. You're coming here and you're being a run defending middle linebacker. And again, to my point, you have guys with that kind of athleticism. It'll make your defense a lot better. And I didn't really know where what his natural position was going to be.
And it's not just, the linebacker safety combos or the safety corner combos. We've got defensive linemen like this too. Leonard Williams was one of the best overall prospects in his draft class. And for the New York Jets, they just did not use that versatility he had. They tried him as an edge at times. They moved him inside to the 3. At times they'd put him at a 4 or 5 tech, which I thought was his best fit. But with a guy like that, you want to use multiple fronts. You want to move him all around the defensive line and take advantage of that versatility. The Jets probably didn't do it as good as they should have. He's really flourished with the New York Giants system. I look at another guy, very similar prospect, Solomon Thomas in San Francisco. He's done next to nothing for them. And, the truth is, he was a guy that a lot of people argued. Is he a strong side end in a 4-man front? Is he a 4 or 5 technique, in an odd man front or a hybrid scheme? Is he a 3 technique? Honestly, that's kind of what I thought. If you were going to just nail him to one particular position, I thought a 3 technique would probably be the best for him. And we've got a guy, in this year's draft, and I'm switching back over to linebacker safety combo in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah out of Notre Dame. This guy is going to be very undersized if you want to play him at a natural linebacker position. He's going to weigh 220, maybe 225 is his best playing weight. If he gets up into the mid-230s, you're going to start to lose some of that natural athleticism that makes him so special. And once again, you have to have a role in mind for him if you're going to draft him that high. You have to say, no, guys. We're not just going to stick him as a will linebacker. We're going to create a position for him where, we flex him out at times, where, we move him throughout the formation. That way you make the most of his skill set, because a lot of these guys I'm naming are extremely talented football players. They just don't have that natural position. And, it's funny. We hear a term with the NBA now, positionless defenders. It's about time the NFL, with as flexible as offensive weapons are now, from running backs to receivers to tight ends to combinations of both, it's about time we started having some positionless defenders, and defensive coordinators started making the most of them.
Perfect. That was a good conversation, guys. We're going to move on now to our third lesson. We're going to bounce back to Steve here.
My lesson number 3, you can never have too many offensive weapons. And when I say weapons, I mean weapons. I don't mean role players. You look at the way Kansas City has been constructed over the last number of years. I believe Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. But he also has tremendous weapons, to work with. Yes, guys like Mecole Hardman, not a household name, but they have playmakers all over the field on offense. And if you look at a team like Tampa Bay, Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, these guys weren't drafted recently. But if you look at the teams that are making, and a lot of their guys, they were drafted recently. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, 7 years ago. They drafted O.J. Howard. They drafted Ronald Jones, Cameron Brate. The teams that are loading up on offensive weapons are the teams that are capable of making deep playoff pushes. The teams that are consistently trying to get a role player here, to fill in a certain spot. You're not seeing those teams have the same kind of success. Yes, you need the quarterback, but I'll even say, take a team, like Green Bay, had they loaded up on more offensive weapons over the last couple of years, would that have been enough, to help them win the NFC Championship? I don't know, but I'll say this: if you are looking at the teams that are able to compete in today's NFL, it's not because they have a role player here. They have weapons. Weapons make the difference, especially guys that either can help you stretch the field or just a running back that's tremendous in space. You look at Buffalo pre Stephon Diggs versus post Stephon Diggs, totally changed their offense. So I think when you're looking again, these teams that are making deep playoff pushes, you can never have enough weapons, and I don't mean role players. I mean guys that legitimately on one play can change the game.
Absolutely. And Steve, for me being a Dallas Cowboy fan, that's what keeps me optimistic about my Cowboys' chances, although our defenses look so atrocious over the last 2 years, is the fact that, any given day, a variety of offensive players can just go off, for a monster performance. I mean, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb. These are guys that, last year when Dak Prescott was healthy, all three were on pace to catch for over 1,000 yards. You look at a good route runner out of the slot who's got some size, and Cedric Wilson, who came out and had a monster performance, once last year. And it was just because of the matchups. We've seen Zeke Elliott, rush for 100 yards last year. We saw Tony Pollard step in and have some really good performances. Blake Jarwin was a guy that we were really excited about to finally get him into a full-time tight end position. And he gets hurt the first game. Well, our backup Dalton Schultz comes in and he puts together a 60-plus catch season, which only 3 other tight ends in Dallas Cowboys history have ever done. So, offensively, it's funny. Dak Prescott was leading the league in passing when he went down with that horrific leg injury. I think it took 2 weeks for the next best guy to catch him in passing yards. That goes to show that, man, when you load up on those offensive weapons, you always give yourself a chance to have a big night on offense, just because with the matchups, with the matchup game in the NFL, you've always got somebody who you're going to look at who that person is lining up against, or what unit that particular player is setting up against, and you find one you like and you exploit it. So, for me as a Cowboy fan, that's what keeps me optimistic, is the fact that we've loaded up on those offensive weapons. And, we just need to get our defense coming around.
For sure. So this is a great conversation. I know that we could go at this for hours, but we are coming short on time here. So we want to bounce over and get Austin's third lesson.
Absolutely. And this one, it's funny. It's going to be because of multiple different positions that have been coming from the collegiate level. And mine is mobility has become just as vital for a quarterback as size and arm strength. And guys, it's not just because of the quarterback position. It's because over the last 6, 7, 8 years, guys like Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett and Montez Sweat